There we go. So glad to be here this morning. I'm Dina Pierrot, and I will introduce my panelists in just a moment. But first, I'll introduce me because it's all about me right now. I'm an equity advisor for the city of Seattle. I've been here for about a year and a half, almost going on 2 years. I am also the founder of a program called iUrban Teen, which is in 5 states. It's a STEM plus arts program for underrepresented teens. This session that we're going to do is actually one of my 5-part diversity interactive panel sessions, which is 4 hours long. We're going to condense this to 30 minutes. So we're going to try to get the best we can out of these 30 minutes. So first up for my panels, and you guys just wave when I announce you, Michelle Perez. Michelle is a strategist with a background in management consulting and several startups. She has a passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Next, we have Michelle Maggs. Michelle is the executive vice president at Weber Shandwick. Did I say it right? Oh, yay! Which is a global communications firm for those of you who don't know what that is. Oh, that's a great picture of me on there. ADHD, okay? Then we have Jessica Eggert, Eggert? Okay, close. Head of culture and innovation at The Riveter, which now has 3 locations, right? 2 in the Seattle metro area and just opening in Los Angeles. Round of applause for that expansion. Women-owned business. And then, last but not least, Ritu Gupta. And Ritu is founding CEO of Circled In. She's passionate about bringing education to every child to change the world. Round of applause for my panel. Now, on this topic, women in the hidden color barrier, I created this about 15 years ago, actually, and I've done it for different companies across the country because it's something that I'm very passionate about. Because I think about the power of women, the power that we possess collectively. But somewhere we've missed the mark. There's a piece of an exclusion that's in this conversation under this whole umbrella of sisterhood. How do we bridge that divide? Okay? So first question, and for anyone to answer, because I didn't pick anyone in particularly, first question is, do you feel white women are afforded many of the same privileges as white males? And please explain.
I'll jump in.
All right, I'll go next.
So these questions are not easy. They are definitely not easy ones. And it could so quickly become an us versus...
Is your microphone on?
Can you hear? There we go.
There we go.
There we go. So these questions that Dina sent us ahead of time, thank you, are not easy. They are ones where it could quickly become an us versus them conversation. And I think that's definitely not the intention today. It's more of sharing knowledge and empowering each other to take next steps and find some solutions. So do I think that white women are afforded privileges the same as white males? Yes, and not in the exact same ways. Not as many privileges as white males, but still more privileges than women of color. When we talk about the conversation about race, the color of our skin can make or break a situation when we walk in the room. It could cause empathy, or it could cause discomfort. And for women of color, I think that there are these constant barriers and privileges that white women are afforded when they walk in the door that women of color just aren't. When we look at the undergraduate degrees that are the undergraduate degrees every year, about 45% of them are achieved from white women and 25% of them from Black women. I think it's 24% of executives are white women and 2% of them are Black women. The color of our skin white women, when the Me Too movement happened, they were able to speak up and cause outrage. And while many women of color across the board could not even speak up. So, like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have to watch my words, but no, not really, honestly. I think
don't watch it.
we're in a
Keep it
safe
real.
space.
Yeah.
We're in a safe space. So yes, I think that the color of our skin between women, white women and women of color has some massive differences. I think that, like, does anyone want to step in?
Yeah. I also agree with that. And I think one way I wanted to really highlight that is a lot of times career advice doesn't apply across the board. So if you encourage women as a whole to either act more male, which has its own issues in itself, be cognizant that as a woman of color, a lot of times we are not afforded those same privileges or leniency as well. Like, you don't want to come off as the angry whatever. So, if you're being assertive, that a lot of times can actually go against you. So as you are mentoring younger women, especially diverse women, I'd encourage you to think through and put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from and some of the barriers that they're facing, because for anyone, advice does not apply across the board.
I think it's a good point, really fast, if you don't mind if I jump back in. So when women of color speak up or lead a room or stand their ground, they're constantly having to battle both racial and gender stereotypes. And so there's a big difference there when we speak up, when we try to say anything. I mean, it's so interesting. 55 years ago, most of us couldn't even be in the same room together. And it seems like so long ago, but I mean, many of you have probably been in that situation where, we couldn't be in the same room together. We couldn't drink from the same water fountain. We couldn't ride, together in a car. I couldn't be married to my white male husband. So I think that those generations of just systemic issues and inequalities are keeping us still from having those same privileges, and it's going to take a really long time to change.
Yeah, and as the white woman up here,
So you're a brave soul, Michelle.
absolutely, I've been afforded privilege and opportunity based on my skin color. But I have absolutely also experienced inequity due to my gender, and that still exists today. I work for an amazing company that has a lot of women leaders in it, but I haven't always been there. And I have experienced, there is still the men's club. There are still rooms that I'm not invited in. There are still baseball games and golf outings that I wouldn't even be considered being on that invitation list, so I don't have the access maybe that others would have. So from my perspective, racially, I've benefited, but gender-wise, there's still a gap.
So that huge gap. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, and actually pretty much ditto to what they said. Only thing I will highlight is, so I grew up in India. So I bring third dimension to this conversation. So we are talking gender, we are talking race, and now we are talking upbringing. So I have triple challenge when it comes to any conversation and bonding. Going back to the original question, I do think there's absolutely no question here whether women are somehow not getting the equity in the world. It's very clear. Look at number of CEOs in Fortune 50 companies or even 500 companies. The question is, as white women, do they get a little bit better surveys, if you will, than women of color? And I think that is true, and here's why. When a white woman is on the table or walks in the room, everybody sees their wife, daughter, or mom because they can connect with them. They can have the conversation. There's still some respect. But when a woman of color walks into the room, how many people think of the maid who works at their house, or somebody, maybe a landscaping company's administrator that they may have interacted with? How many people watched that video that went viral when a kid walked into his dad's conference and mom came and everybody thought she was the nanny? Those are the implicit biases we all have, including you and I, that when it's not just the gender, it's not just the color, it's your where you come from. That also impacts. And of course, women of color, more of those check boxes you have, interestingly, I think richer your life is, but harder your life is. Because everybody else sees you as a maid, for example, or as a nanny, not wife of an ambassador who's running a big company. So that is how I view this. More check boxes you have, richer your life is, but harder your life is.
I agree. And the biases that we all carry. And I always say, if you have a brain, you have a bias. And even that video, I hate to say, I thought she was the nanny as well. And when I realized she wasn't, that, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be working in this space, but I still did it, you know? So we all do it. And the biases that we may carry that are embedded from the time we're little babies all the way until the time we grow up, the thing is we all have them, but how do you interrupt them, right? How do you start changing that narrative on them? So thank you so very much. One of the examples that I gave the women here was, I've been in the workplace for a long time, and I've been in certain meetings where I may be the only woman of color in that meeting, and I give my opinion, and usually a white woman would say, the whole body language and everything, what I think she meant was. So the first time it happened, I was like, I automatically felt othered. The second time it happened, I did the same body language. I think they heard me. Did you guys all hear me? I didn't stutter. You know, so even working with, and this is a two-way conversation, even for the women of color, how do you have your voice heard? How do you stand up for yourselves in these type of situations and not just let this consistently happen to you? Because there's a way that we can shift this dial ourselves. We have a lot of more power than we give ourselves, you know, in these situations. So next question, unless someone wanted to add into
Can
that.
I just jump on that?
I guess so.
I asked first.
Okay.
But one part of when you shared that story, you said, but afterward, you guys had a conversation about
Yeah.
that. And I think that's so important because
That
you
is
talk
so
about the
pivotal.
snapping out of the bias, your unconscious bias. Sometimes we have those experiences in a moment, and then you just go back to your desk and keep working instead of
and you're still like,
that
what just
really
happened?
bothered me, and have a conversation and then
Exactly.
learn from that and have
That
more
is-
awareness, right?
That is that whole part of engagement that I talk about is like, if I did that to Michelle, I would wait. I wouldn't do it in that moment, but afterwards I would have the conversation on why I did that, because of how you made me feel in that situation. That felt like a bias. You know, that was a microaggression that you don't realize just happened. So how do we solve this? It's a learning experience for her, but it's also empowering for me because I had my voice heard and I explained it and she understood. And we're still best buds, right? That's right. That's right. So, and I tell that even for women, for white women, when you're in a situation with all men and they do that to you, you do something very similar, but you have that conversation with that man afterwards and let him know, because that's a learning experience for him as well. Next question. In what ways do women maintain systems that are detrimental to other women? That's more general. What do we do as barriers to all women?
I'll go first.
I know, I'm looking at you, I'm like, okay, you're next.
In my experience, for some reason, I think women are actually harder on other women. And I don't know if that's because, as one of the few that have, gotten to a certain level, people feel that, you've earned your way and that others need to kind of scrape to get there too. I'm all about lift while you climb. You shouldn't be making it harder for other people, and recognizing that we totally respect what you had to go through to get to where you are, but you shouldn't also be keeping your foot down on the younger generation as well. And I don't know, that's just been my experience in my career. I think women, for the most part, have been harder on other women. And I read a statistic that women tend to manage women more as well. So it's kind of a systematic thing too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think women are harder on women, not only as managers and bosses and leaders, but even in other situations. So I spent 20 years in corporate America, different jobs. And 4 years ago, I started my own company, Circle Jane. A whole another conversation on investment and how little funding goes to women-founded companies, which is actually 2.3%. Oh, by the way, women of color is 0.03%. So going back to stats for the previous question, but the thing is, there are very few women in the VC world, meaning women who are actually writing the checks. And when they are writing the checks, they are very, 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 very hard on women founders. And partially, I think they think that they have to prove themselves in front of their male allies. This is just an hypothesis, I don't know. But only if you could be at least equally hard as you are on men. Yes, you have to make money. Yes, you have to get returns to your investors, but treat them equally, whether it's male or female, and also be conscious of that bias that you may be having. And I think that is how we have this problem, because if more women are not being risen, there will always be a lack of women in the leadership. There will always be a lack of women who can help the next woman. So it's that challenge where, one, we are harder on our subordinates or our direct reports or people who are younger than us. And as peers, another thing that I believe, like when you are in a meeting, I have been in some of those just casual conversations around water cooler. And as I said, white women still have something common with white men. They went to same concerts when they were growing up. So when you are having this conversation, women of color or women from another country may not have gone to those concerts. I never had that experience of concert. So when those conversations are going on, that's how women of color, and especially immigrant women of color, feel left out. Think when men are actually smoking and they are making decisions, big decisions are made at the smoking places or in golf course. Every woman feels left out because they are not part of the conversation. Similarly, when you are having those traditional country specific conversations, you are leaving other women of color or women of other origin left out from that conversation. It's the same feeling.
I want to jump on to what both of you are saying. I think, and it's interesting that we all went here. Women tend to hoard success. I think you go back to that stat about how only 24% of executives are women, and there tends to only be one corner office for women. And we get into this mindset, like you're saying, like, I fought for it, you have to fight for it too, thinking that there's only a small space. And even though that is it's true often, it's one of the reasons I actually joined the Riveter. We have to break down those walls, right? And broaden that space and take over a floor or take over half the building even take over the entire building. Right? And really bring each other along and stop hoarding that success.
And I would say too, we've talked about some of the blatant ways women keep women down. I think that unconscious bias plays another role here. And we've talked about opportunity bias, where women managers are thinking, I can't give that really rich, meaty, gritty assignment to that woman. She just had twins. I can't give that overseas assignment to that woman. She just got married or they're planning to start a family. Without even having the conversation with that woman, you make a decision based on your bias, and that's holding them back. So it's unintentional, but that's happening.
Yeah. I also want to ask, do you feel that, because I know this as for a fact, that a lot of times people that are in diversity roles, diversity directors or whatever, people of color, or even women in the workplace, they feel that it's at their detriment to champion other women, that they may not move as fast up the corporate ladder because they're advocating for others. Do you think that is true to form? Do you feel that that does actually happen in the workplace?
I personally actually didn't feel that particular situation. In fact, I felt the other. I had mentors and champions in my company who were women and men, of course, and they were white women. In fact, two of my biggest mentors are white women, and they were my champion like no one else. They changed the trajectory of my career. They went to bat for me. And so I have had a lot of tremendous support from women. I personally didn't think that particular aspect that you're mentioning.
Yeah, same. I've had great mentors that were women and men. And boy, if me advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion is a detriment to my career, I mean, I'm in big trouble because I'm out and proud about that. It's very, very important to me. It's not only the right thing to do, it's good for business. And that's my brand. That's what I represent. So I'm fortunate that I work for a company, though, that shares that value. I think we went through an exercise 12 months ago where our CEO talked about the importance of diversity, and we're going to actually affect massive change. It's a huge undertaking. It's not a committee. It's not one person's role. And we said, if we're going to really make change happen, we have to look at the values of our company and reintroduce them. And we may lose employees, but it's true to who we are, and it's how we want to run our business. And so.
God, no, I love that. We only have 8 minutes left, and I really want to get to this last segment here because I always like to have takeaways, things that you guys can do right now, tomorrow, next week, next year, whatever. So I've asked my panelists, what are some of the ways that white women can support women of color in the workplace? How can they use that privilege?
So, so I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Ijeoma Oluo.
I was going to mention that book.
Oh my gosh, she's so amazing. And I'm reading the book right now. She's a New York Times bestseller. She's actually local to Washington and wrote a book called So You Want to Talk About Race. And we had the privilege of having her into the space a few weeks ago when we canceled another event due to some controversy over this specific book, where she was brought up and pitted against another woman of color, where it was, here's the actions of what a woman of color should be doing versus what another woman should not have been. It was crazy, but she came in and she spoke, and she just, the entire room was silent, all eyes on her. She was a powerful speaker, and I need to learn from her. And she said, one of the ways that we can, start helping other women of color start listening more is just to stop and just to listen and give that space. Right? There's an inclusion diversity consultant that I follow who said, stop not believing women when they speak up and they say a story. Just take it as gospel and take what they're saying in, and then go and do your own fact checks afterwards, but don't question them in this space. Give that space, believe them, because nobody wants to have these stories. And, no one wants to, when they come out and tell you something or, tell you they've been mistreated in a way, whether it's a woman or a woman of color, no one's excited to tell you that, right? We're not proud of that. We're saying it because it sucks. And we need to tell somebody and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. So take it as gospel, don't question it, and go do your own fact checks afterwards, right? Give that space.
So the book, I did want to plug. Definitely read it. It's great. I've been recommending to everyone. It's called So You Want to Talk About Race, Ijeoma Oluo. She was a great speaker that night. But it goes through really putting yourself in another person's shoes. And I think that's the main point, is understanding where a woman of color's perspective is coming from, and where a lot of times an innocent comment may feel like no big deal. But when you've had microaggressions against you your entire life, if it's the one that breaks into the camel's back, there's a reason for it. So just become an ally, really understand what that means. And I will caution, in some of the work that I've done, that a lot of times people do feel that equality for everyone almost feels like oppression for some. So I would be careful too of really understanding what being an ally means. It means being equal. It means giving everyone a seat at the table. And if that means you don't get a seat at the table, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with, it's also qualified people. It's not diversity hires. It's not what people think of as, you're giving someone who's not qualified. I think that should go without saying. So be an ally, be comfortable with what equality means, and listen to others.
I would say I know you said diversity hires, but I do think putting women of color in senior leadership roles is really, really important, not only to provide that opportunity, but then when we're recruiting more diverse talent, they look around and they see people who look like them, and they're more likely to stay. Because often you can recruit people in, but if they don't feel like their community is represented in the workplace, they tend to leave. So I would just add that point. And then just not being afraid of the tough conversations. I think there's so much going on in society. Unfortunately, there's something in the news every week. And I know that I run the office here in Seattle, and I've had conversations about, should we talk about this at work? Like, should we even bring this up? How do we talk about this? We have to talk about this, and we have to know that it's going to be tough, and we're probably going to screw it up sometimes and say things the wrong way. But until we make it feel like that kind of dialogue has a place at work, because we're all human and we bring that to work, I think that's where we can really affect change.
So two things I will say. One is half the battle is won when you think there's a battle to win, meaning implicit biases. We all do have that. You, I, everybody in this person, without knowing it. Be aware of that. That's half the battle won. Whether it's related to skin, color of the skin or gender or race or whatever, be conscious of that. That's one thing. Number two, let's not forget this. 50.6% population of this planet is women. We cannot leave half the population behind. All the stats, whether it's in corporations or whether it's in startup community, women-founded companies get 46% better financial returns for investors. So there's room for everyone. When you are helping a woman, you are helping your economy, you are helping nation, you are helping society, you are helping the species. Imagine if every woman just goes to workforce without having kids, what will happen? We'll go extinct. So we are doing ourselves favor by helping women. We are keeping our species alive for a million more years, right? So when you bring women, when you help them, you bring them as allies, you bring them in the boardroom, you promote them, you invest in them, you are doing it all good. It's all right. There's nothing wrong. Nobody is losing. Everybody is a winner when we bring half the population along with us. And oh, by the way, more than 80% decisions for purchases in a household are made by women. If you're running a company or if you are working for a company, you want your customers to be in your boardroom. You want your customers on your advisory board. You want your customers not only paying you money, but designing the products that your customers will be buying. So all about sisterhood. It's not just sisterhood for the sake of sisterhood. It's bringing 50% of the population with you. It's bringing 80% of your customers with you. So do you want to be successful? Bring more women on the table. That simple.
Oh, I love it. Round of applause for my panelists. Now, a round of applause for me. I am such a ham. I can't stand myself sometimes. But, and we're almost out of time, but I wanted to say words have a lot of meaning to them. And even the word ally, for me, and I only can speak in my voice, that still gives power to that other person. I need you to be my ally. How about if you're my partner in crime? Okay. How about if you're my collaborator, that we're doing this, we're at an equal playing field here. We are peer to peer. I don't need you to be my ally. I need you to be my partner. So when you think about things moving forward, how can you be a partner to someone who doesn't look like you? Okay. How can we strengthen this bond of sisterhood that we have? Because as women, we have some of the same challenges, but all tides don't lift all boats. And so there are several women that are still waiting for that tide. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed today, and I hope that I get to meet all of you on LinkedIn. Round of applause to you.